EA Pass while I'm reacting to the embarrassing decline of Brazilian football. This is obviously been a while since I've done some Brazilian stuff. Over, check it out. Obviously I've been doing the same kind of stuff over and over, and I've been just honestly getting kind of bored, unmotivated to wanting to keep doing the exact same thing over and over. And I've been doing a lot of like the Instagram stuff like that. So, and I haven't done a lot of Brazilian stuff in a hot minute, so we're gonna go back to doing it again. So gonna be some more requests and stuff like that down below in the comment section. Obviously, I'm gonna be a little bit rusty as far as like my Portuguese and Brazilian, that whole thing, 'cause it's been a minute. But if you guys like the video, as always, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button down below too. Very much appreciated. Let's get right into the video. Let's go.
Had to be
Vamos! I forgot.
to
Vamos!
witness,
Vamos!
because for the younger generation, perhaps that Brazil will be nothing more than a legend or fairy tale, as their once iconic identity might never be replicated again. After all, as they
That's the
say, every empire eventually.
Sorry, 1 second. Like, I don't watch football like that. So it's like I never really thought about it, but then now I think about it, I'm like, I guess Brazil's always been like decent in like the World Cups and stuff. I think like every year they're always decent in the World Cups. They obviously have like Neymar, they have people like that. They have a good solid team, but obviously they don't have like Pele, like the major, like major known Brazilian football players anymore. So
eventually faces its fall. But within the context of football, it's
there's
just hard to
Neymar.
believe that we would have
He's like the
ever
only one I
seen Brazilian
really.
football fall from their once untouchable heights. From their Jogo Bonito or beautiful game growing in obsolescence to modern tactics, loss of identity, seemingly fading talent, and a failure to
It's Vinny
evolve.
Jr., I think.
From a team that every nation once dreaded to go up against, to a team now that is only up a single point above countries like Bolivia, that with continued form might possibly not even qualify for the next World Cup. This is the decline of Brazilian football and how it's happening.
What an intro.
In the early 1900s, football had already found its way to the shores of Brazil, but at first it wasn't a game for everyone. The sport in its early days was almost exclusively reserved for the Brazilian upper class, white or European descent Brazilians who could afford to play as unpaid amateurs. They would form their typical clubs, play in pristine and regulation quality pitches, and adhering to very formal positions and tactics. Very proper or even bourgeois, you could say. As after all, it was a game for the privileged, a very different image from football today. But outside those exclusive fields, there was another version of the game that was brewing. A more raw and untamed version that would soon defy the norms and standards. In the alleys, streets, and empty lots where space was limited, often dirty, tight, or far from favorable, the poorer, working-class Brazilians who were more often than not of African or indigenous descent began to play their own game. One with makeshift goals and improvised balls that was finding its roots with flair, control, and creativity. And it
Just correct me if I'm wrong, but does that mean Brazil, like, created football essentially, or am I wrong about that? Like, let me know down below. Because obviously it seems like he's kind of talking like they kind of invented football, and then it kind of just like grew more popular and popular as like the years went on.
improvised balls that was finding its roots with flair, control, and creativity. And it was there in the hearts of those street pickup games that the essence of Jogo Bonito would slowly start to take form, quietly but unmistakably setting the stage for a footballing revolution that would soon take the world by storm. And the evidence of that unique Brazilian style is all there in its history. That flashy, rhythmic dribbling of players mirrored the fluid steps of samba, a dance that holds its mark all throughout Brazilian culture. Juggling, bicycle kicks, and using your head, shoulders, and back to control the ball is all echoed in the movements of capoeira, Brazil's dancing martial arts.
How do you
then,
do?
In 1958, a player who was born from that slowly evolving football culture that was different from any...
Like, bro, I can't even get my leg up, like, above my head. Like, look at that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't even get my leg above my head, let alone, like, do bicycle kicks or flip around in the air.
Would
Ain't no way.
make his way from a poor
How are they
Sao
even...
Paulo all the way to the global stage.
They're built different, I guess.
His name was Pelé, almost as if he was the embodiment of the Brazilian football spirit. At just 17 years old, he, along with other Brazilian legends like Garrincha and Vava, would completely overwhelm their opponents, shocking the world with creativity and style that many were only witnessing for the very first time. while
ate 'em
other
up.
teams were, as you could describe, as more organized, playing in fixed positions with rigid and stagnant formations. Brazil would completely overwhelm them.
Yeah, like it seems like they kind of they created football in a way. Like they made it more like complicated and stuff. Before it's probably just like, a little bit of BS bull. I mean, just them just kind of like messing around or whatever. But now it kind of seems like they kind of created like the formations, obviously, like the positions, and made it like more of a sport than
With rigid
anything.
and stagnant formations, Brazil
what I
would
can tell.
completely overwhelm them with flair and creativity. They were just so ahead of their time that they almost seemed invincible. Their golden era of over a decade in the national team led by Pelé was truly mighty. Winning
Pelé.
3 out of 4 World Cups, made up of homegrown players that played for their local clubs and all represented the Brazilian league. Sure, many might look back at the time and think that it wasn't as impressive because they played against poor competition or quote-unquote farmers, as some might even call it. And I gotta admit, I once had that opinion as well. But the fact of the matter is that for their time, they were just so much better than everyone else. And their dominance of that era solidified Brazil to many as the footballing nation. They would inspire generations of other players worldwide to change their game, improve their dribbling, and even slowly start trying new skills. And naturally, in Brazil, football would become their pride. Every child wanted to one day represent Brazil and continue that legendary identity that Pelé's generation established. By the 1980s, Brazil's footballing legacy was already carved in stone. But the era of Zico, better known as the White Pelé, captured yet another chapter.
People call them. Okay.
Led by Socrates, Maestro Jr., Eder, and of course, Zico himself. Though they might not have claimed as many titles as their predecessors, this generation pushed Brazil's football identity further, playing what was seen as then the most beautiful football in the world. They played with that same unmistakable flair, but introduced a more refined playmaking genius and tactical structure that cemented their status as legends. And even though the trophies did elude them, Brazil remained a force, feared and respected, consistently making deep runs in the World Cup. And in 1989, they even managed to do what Pelé's generation never could, finally lift the Copa America, the prize that had slipped through Brazil's grasp for decades. But it wouldn't be long until another generation came and would once more strike absolute terror upon the footballing world. By the 1990s, Brazil found itself on the cusp of a new era that would break their World Cup drought. In 1994, Brazil roared back to the pinnacle of football, led by the electrifying Romario. His goal-scoring dominance and talent reignited the nation's hopes. But although Romario himself believed that that Brazilian side wasn't nearly as stacked as the legendary teams before him, he said what they lacked in overall talent and solid tactics, they made up for with team unity and an unstoppable attack. Together with Bebeto, Romario would form a partnership that overwhelmed opponent defenses, leading Brazil to the final where they would triumph over a Roberto Baggio-led Italy, going on to lift their nation's 4th World Cup. But that victory signaled not just a return to dominance, but the arrival of yet another generational talent that only made them...
I wonder, were they like the first ever the first ever team to ever win a World Cup? Or like they were like the first... I don't know. It's kind of confusing. So let me explain some more stuff. Give me like some more extra stuff that they haven't already talked about in this video. They might also talk about it like towards the end and stuff too. So, there's the downfall, and then there's why did they stop winning? Blah blah blah.
Not just a return to dominance, but the arrival of yet another generational talent.
I'm just curious about some stuff. It's like
even better. Ronaldo. Soon he became known as the phenomenon. Ronaldo's Brazil as the top scorer 100%. Of the 1997 Copa America, along with winning the prestigious Ballon d'Or.
He has like
once more left the Copa America trophy and also claimed the Confederations Cup the very same year, with a squad filled with names like Rivaldo, Cafu, Roberto Carlos, and many more. Brazil had become a force that no team on earth wanted to play. But surprisingly, in the 1998 World Cup, where they were the overwhelming favorites, it would be France that came out on top as the underdogs and lift the World Cup in their own soil. But not for a single moment did anyone think that Brazil were going away, because despite the World Cup final loss, they would quickly recover and continue their dominance. Just ask Argentina, as they witnessed an absolute show of Jogo Bonito, with the brilliance of Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, and of course Ronaldo, absolutely toying with their bitter neighborly rivals while handing out the most casual
alone having
4-1 defeat
Ronaldinho and
you
Ronaldo
could
on the same
ever
team is
see.
wild to
Brazil's
me.
famous 3 Rs would help them bounce back from that 1998 World Cup defeat, as they would demolish the entire South American continent and win the 1999 Copa America. That's why in the 2002 World Cup, it came as no surprise that this time Brazil wasn't settling for anything less than the World Cup trophy. And this squad that had remained relatively the same as the last World Cup, captained by Cafu and immortalized with Ronaldo's infamous
This is the
haircut,
infamous
would go
haircut.
on to effortlessly
this
beat
hair that's just on the
everyone
front.
underway as Brazil
Classic.
would lift its 5th World Cup. Imagine if they had just won that 1998 final against Zidane. That would have been an insane 3 consecutive World Cup trophies, making
Yup.
them not only the most successful national side of all time, but also the only to ever accomplish such a feat. It would have been unquestionable that they would have been known as the greatest generational dynasty in football history. And I'm sure for many Brazilian fans,
Are they not still are though? Like, are they not still the? I mean, like, what other country is like?
far
what I mean?
surpassing that of their predecessors.
Realistically, what
Because
country's
World
better
Cup aside,
than,
Brazil
like,
would continue to
Brazilian
completely
football?
dominate Copa America for the next several years. Like in the 2004 Copa America, when it seemed like Argentina was about to steal the show, with Brazil trailing 2-1 and Argentine fans chanting loudly. Heck, even Carlos Tevez dared to taunt the team. Argentina was so close to victory, but in the dying moments, Adriano struck a thunderous equalizer, silencing the Argentine fans and sending the match into penalties, where Brazil would ultimately come out on top. A year later in the 2005 Confederations Cup, this time led by Ronaldinho, the Seleção would deliver another masterclass, dominating Argentina once more 4-1 in the final. And for such a rivalry between these two nations, those continued wins over Argentina were more than
Very
just
interesting video,
victories.
though.
For the players and the people,
Like, I'm
they
locked in.
were
I'm not
a
even talking much.
statement.
I'm poker.
So with a squad brimming with legends, this Brazil team swaggered into the 2006 World Cup. Ronaldo, Ronaldinho in his prime, and Kaká in his prime. They were seen as once more the overwhelming favorites. But likewise, once more,
What are you licking his lips
Zidane
like
was
that? He's like,
once more the overwhelming favorites. But likewise, once
damn.
more, Zidane
Chill.
was there as
You're good.
Brazil's
Your lips are
kryptonite,
moist.
giving arguably the best
Okay.
performance of his
Mwah.
French international career to put on an absolute show and hand defeat to this world-beating Brazilian squad. But again, despite a World Cup loss and aging legends, Brazil would still come back as strong as ever. Because even as their 4 Ballon d'Or winners would slowly pass the baton to the next generation, Brazil was brewing up what seemed like another monstrous generation to follow in their footsteps. Adriano, who was supposed to be Ronaldo's
Adriano.
successor, and other emerging talents like Robinho, who many were calling the next Pele, and even Dani Alves, was already quickly becoming known as the fullback replacement for Cafu. They would dominate over Argentina once more, winning 3-1 in the Copa America final
Damn.
to redeem their World Cup
Damn.
shortcomings
Damn.
and defend their trophy. But that early 2000s generation, as we know now, would suddenly implode for various reasons and never lived up to their potential. It's around this time, closer to 2010, that Brazil's
messed him up.
identity was slowly changing for the worse. It wouldn't be until a few years later that Brazil could once more
What was that
proudly
shot?
claim another generational talent of years later that Brazil
He literally
could
sent that
once
up to the-
more
up to the
proudly
people.
claim another
Like, you know what? Here's one for you
generational
guys. You
talent
got
with room
this.
to put
Yeah.
their hopes and dreams of reviving the country's prestigious identity. And as we all know, his name was Neymar. Although
Neymar.
Brazil had a generational talent to once more try and lead them to a different era of glory, there was already
And Neymar's like this generation's version of like a Pele or like a, you know, things like that. I don't know why, because I feel like Neymar is like, I mean, Neymar's fucking great. He's a great football player, but I'm saying like he's very popularized, if that makes sense. Of course, I mean, he started a little like whenever football was like on its like at its peak, you
had
know,
a generational
popularity.
talent to once more try and lead them to
That's
a
probably
different
why,
era
but-
of glory. There was already a lot of damage slowly being done to the Seleção. Nobody could have really guessed it yet, but in 2014, Brazil would enter the World Cup hosted in no other than their own soil, only to experience one of the most infamous moments in footballing history. Because in the heat of the World Cup semifinals, Oscar would valiantly break through the German defense, weaving a
Ooh.
dazzling scoring a goal for Brazil and shocking the world as they would embarrassingly lose 7-1 to Germany. From then on, a new crisis would take hold of the Brazilian national team. In the 2015 Copa America, there were more controversies.
Sorry,
Neymar
Brazil.
lost his temper during a match against got a yellow card and getting a 2-match
7-1.
suspension. Afterwards, Brazil would be eliminated by Paraguay in penalties. Then the Centenario
Yikes.
edition of the Copa America marked another bitter chapter for Brazil. A controversial handball goal saw Peru knocking them out of the quarterfinals with a 1-0 defeat. This would lead to the departure of longtime manager Dunga. In the 2018 World Cup, on paper, Brazil looked like one of the favorites. But all was not well beneath the surface. Neymar was just returning from injury, and it showed. They would struggle during the group stages, and even though they did push through, they would eventually come across Belgium's golden generation. Brazil would quickly find themselves down 2-0 in the first half, which ultimately they could never recover from.
Never.
And were once more sent home early. For many, it seemed like Brazil's identity had slowly shifted. No more was there any Joga Bonito to be seen. Instead, the squad slowly became more of a media spectacle than footballing brilliance, as many of these modern stars would care more about celebrity status, which
So this
was
is like
a
the
far
downfall,
cry from
I
the
assume,
previous
of-
generations. They would
Okay.
surprisingly win the 2019 Copa America without Neymar, but to many that victory didn't really look all that convincing. 0-0 with Venezuela and 0-0 with Paraguay. The team had barely made it out, and through the years it seemed like those criticisms did have some merit.
Messy.
As in the 2021 Copa America, Brazil would fight tooth and nail to make it all the way to the final, only to suffer a crushing defeat at home to no other than their fiercest rivals, Argentina. After so many generations
Messi.
of Brazilian dominance, Messi would lift his first international title in no less than Brazilian soil. Truly a painful symbol to Brazil's fading dominance.
The GOAT.
However, in the 2022 World Cup, it seemed like there was a glimmer of hope. As of recent, Brazil were in insane form. In 17 matches, they would have 14 wins and 3 draws. Not a
That's solid.
single loss leading up to the tournament.
That's very good.
More mature Neymar was once back to lead his country. And alongside him, there were a lot of promising talent like Vini Jr. and Rodrigo. Everyone was
Yeah.
in good form.
Yeah.
Charlison,
Vini Jr.
Paqueta, Rafinha, heck, even Antony. And they would, with a little difficulty, make it to the quarterfinal. Now, against Croatia, as the final minutes of the game were coming to an end, Neymar would step up in a moment of brilliance, scoring one of the best goals in the tournament, lighting roars throughout the stadium. However, with only mere minutes left, Croatia would equalize in devastating fashion. A complete breakdown and disorganization of the Brazilian defense. And of course, in the penalty shootout,
No way
Brazil
you
would
missed
falter.
that.
That recent form that they had been in looked almost non-existent, as they would do horribly, with their best player Neymar not even getting the chance to take his shot. This was perhaps the best opportunity Brazil had in years to reclaim their former glory. And for all the criticism he gets, Neymar played his absolute heart out. But when it mattered most, his inexperienced team would let him down. And watching him in tears was one of the most heartbreaking moments of the tournament. Following the heartbreaking loss was another change in team management. And this was really the beginning of a turbulent chapter for not only the Brazilian team, but for the entirety of the
Poor Neymar,
Brazilian
man.
Footballing Federation. Corruption scandals, accusations of harassments, and waves of internal chaos began to tarnish the image
Oh,
of the
gosh.
once proud federation. Now we would see
That's not
Brazil
good, is it?
faltering even in friendlies, suffering unexpected losses to countries like Morocco and Senegal. And things would go bad to worse, as 3 consecutive defeats in World Cup qualifying only further deepened the crisis. Dorival Jr.'s appointment brought a brief flicker of hope, but even that would quickly fade away. As Copa America came around, the issues would only further appear. In 4 matches, they would have 1 win and 2 draws, with a crushing quarterfinal defeat to Uruguay. Now sitting precariously in 5th place in the qualifiers, just a single point away from the unthinkable,
Yeah, like 3
possibly
and
the
4.
biggest World Cup qualifying
Not
shock
great, is it?
of the 21st century. Brazilian football, once defined by its fluid, attacking style, has now become more rigid in recent years. In my opinion, the current generation really had an over-reliance on Neymar, as almost always, whenever he's absent, the squad just seems to lack that dynamic spark of past generations. Sure, Vini Jr. and Rodrigo are easily their best talents, but even then, Brazil lacks the midfield quality that they're used to at Madrid. And as we've seen, it's really hard for them to operate without having an ideal piece in the middle to help them flourish. the Samba playstyle has really been diluted, as Neymar is really the last player to show this trait. Brazil right now lacks anyone who can really operate by themselves, no matter the quality of players that surround him. And with more Brazilian players leaving Brazil and heading to European academies and European clubs at an earlier age, it seems like the Brazilian flair is slowly dying. Heck, it's hard to find someone in the Brazilian national team that even plays for a club in Brazil. And historically, but much more now, Brazil has really slowly been failing to replenish any world-class defenders. And it doesn't help that the Brazilian leagues have never really pushed a defensive playstyle, so it's already hard to find new defensive talent from their own home soil. And when you add the fact that Brazil really has never produced any world-class coaches, because when was the last time you saw a Brazilian manager that was really in charge of a major club in a major league? And since Carlo Ancelotti has decided to stay with Real Madrid longer and abandon his plans for becoming Brazil's manager, well, it looks like from that aspect they are gonna continue to struggle. And even off the field. And from what it seems like to me and for many, Brazil's players just really lack cohesion and chemistry. But it really does make sense, as although they're Brazilian, many of them have already left Brazil from such a young age, often having different upbringings in different countries with different cultures. You have Brazilian talents developing in Spain, Germany, Italy, France, and England, all of whom have never really had the chance to develop with each other in their own home soil. And while other nations have been quick to embrace more modern tactical innovations, Brazil has been slower to adapt, consistently relying on a style that has been slowly fading away.
I know. That's a good video though, man. It's very interesting. Obviously just knowing like the backstory behind like Brazilian football in general, all that stuff is very interesting. Obviously I wasn't talking much, so apologies for that. But it's because I was locked in. I was interested in trying to figure out what was going on, all that stuff. So either way, if you guys like the video, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button down below too. Very much appreciated. I'm Antonio Você. I love y'all. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.